Hello and welcome back to the Basketball Addicts podcast, where we answer the age-old question, the question that everybody wants to answer to is, how can you hate from outside the finals? You can't even get in. How can you hate from outside the finals when you can't even get in? We back again, baby. Part 4 of the 7-week series in which we talk about and discuss the greatest upsets in playoff history. Part 4, we have the 2018 New Orleans Pelicans, led by Anthony Davis, versus the Portland Trail Blazers, led by Dame Lillard and TJ McCollum, which recently had a breakup. Not saying that I saw it coming, but if you listen to this podcast, we saw it coming. We hoped it would come sooner. We're glad that it did. Now we have to figure out where we go from here with Portland. Portland's trying to say that they want to, move some pieces around so they get some high-level talent. But are you really attracted to Portland? I mean, Dame's a little attractive, you're like, okay, maybe I'll go play with Dame. But, Portland, you're, thinking, I don't know. I think that before they could attract high-level talent to entice Dame would leave. That's just my personal opinion. But anyway, off that. Now back to the subject matter. How can you hate from outside the finals? Well, I'll tell you. We have the number 6 New Orleans Pelicans playing the number 3 Portland Trail Blazers. So the Portland Trail Blazers did not have Norman Powell yet. The team had Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Al-Farouq Aminu, Yusuf Nurkic, Evan Turner, Pat Connaughton, Zach Collins. Those were the key players on the team. So they got the 3 seed and they earned the 3 seed and throughout the regular season with CJ McCollum, Damian Lillard dominating offensively. It's a guard predicated, it was a guard predicated team. It's very important with their, guard play was very important with their pick and roll, with Nurkic, and they had Evan Turner, the third scorer, ball handler, and Al-Farouq Aminu, who was their most elite defender. He was a very good defender at that point in time, probably a top 25, 30 greatest defender in the league at that moment in time. He was really good and could hit a 3-point shot. So they had an efficient offense and different people to do different things. The New Orleans Pelicans did originally have DeMarcus Cousins this season through trade, but he was hurt during during this playoff series. So it was Rajon Rondo, Drew Holiday, Anthony Davis, Nikolai Mirotic, Etuan Moore, and those were the main contributors to the team. So this team earned the 6th seed due to not having that much offensive talent. They didn't have the same amount of offensive talent as the Portland Trail Blazers as well throughout the regular season to have the 3 seed, but they had some pieces on the team that were absolutely terrible matchup for the Portland Trail Blazers, which we will describe now. The Portland Trail Blazers team is a guard-oriented offense. So because of that, the matchup between them and Rondo and Drew Holiday was terrible because Rondo is a basketball genius. This is facts. You can't deny it. He has a great basketball mind. And at that point in time, he was still an elite defender. And then you also had Drew Holiday, who did not receive the recognition yet, but was already in a defensive level defender as well. He's like the greatest guard defender right now in the league. So most teams who played the Portland Trail Blazers throughout the regular season might have had one good defender for the guard position, and the other person who is not being guarded between Dame and CJ usually had to play against an average defender, and they would destroy them. Just typically speaking, they would destroy them. If you have CJ on you and you're not a good defender, they dropping 40 on you. You have Dame on you, you get 40 dropped on you, not a good defender. You're just gonna get torched and abused the entire game for 48 minutes. You're gonna want to go home crying in the car. Facing off against a team that had 2 elite defenders at the exact same position, both guards, Rondo and Drew Holiday. It was the Portland Trail Blazers' greatest offense, at the guard position, where that was the Portland Trail Blazers' greatest offensive strength, which was the guard position, Dame and CJ. And to stop, and then you have a basketball genius who was coming up with game plans to stop those two, basketball genius, me and Rondo. Stop those two guards was an absolutely horrific matchup. And when they try to get to the rim and finish, they had to finish around Anthony Davis, who was one of the greatest paint defenders of the past decade. He's one of the greatest defenders of the past decade, period. And the Portland Trailblazers' best defender could not guard one of their top two best offensive players. He couldn't guard Anthony Davis or Drew Holiday, so the greatest offensive strength for the New Orleans Pelicans was all facing the worst Portland Trailblazers defensive strengths. So it didn't equal up. You had Ant Davis, Rajon Rondo, right, and Drew Holiday. Three great defenders. If you have a guard-oriented offense like the Portland Trailblazers did, you had CJ and Dame. You have Rondo and Drew Holiday to shut them down. And they're used to, okay, we have one good defender, Dame goes off. Okay, somebody's guarding CJ. It's like they were picking their poison, but at this point, with AD, Rajon Rondo, and Drew Holiday, they couldn't pick their poison. They couldn't have any good games. It was, because you're constantly being defended every single time you touch the ball. There's three great defenders on the floor. And then if you do get past Rondo or Drew Holiday, you have to deal with Anthony Davis in the paint. And at that point, you're not doing anything. So then your greatest strength becomes your greatest weakness in the Portland Trailblazers case. But the Pelicans' greatest defensive strength was against the greatest Portland Trailblazers offense. So the Portland Trailblazers offense was great, but the New Orleans Pelicans defense was better. It's how this matchup ended the way it did. So it's a perfect matchup for the Pelicans, who swept them. It's crazy. Look, we took a step back in time. This is 2018. A 6 seed New Orleans Pelicans slept a 3 seed Portland Trailblazer. Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum together usually would account for 50 points a game. But other than game 4, they never scored more than a combined 42 points in a single game. Game 1, I'll break it down for you. Dame had 18, CJ had 19. Game 2, Dame had 17, CJ had 22. Game 3, Dame had 20, CJ had 22. Game 4, Dame had 19, CJ had 38. So that shows you that they were not producing what they normally produce due to a terrible matchup against a team equipped to shut down what they were greatest at. And even Evan Turner was not good enough scorer to really elevate his game to match his level of what they needed scoring-wise. And due to them being a good team throughout the regular season, that was a team that they were a team that would outscore teams and not being great defensively. They allowed much more points than what the Pelicans had allowed. If the Pelicans would have been a good defensive team, would have had to play a good defensive team, they would not have multiple games of players scoring much greater than what they would have if they weren't playing, the Portland Trailblazers. It's such a terrible defense, which we will show, so which we'll talk about. So, the Portland Trailblazers had such a terrible defense. Pelicans had such a great offense, and it was just kind of vice versa. So, game 1, Ant Davis had 35. Rondo had 17 assists. Game 2, Drew Holiday had 33 points. Game 3, Mirotic had 33 points. Game 3, Mirotic had 30 points. Game 4, Drew Holiday had 41. Ant Davis had 47. So, those numbers there, they absolutely ridiculous, and they back up what we're getting at here. So, and they show you how insanely bad that Portland Trailblazers team was at defense. An example of how bad it really was is that Drew Holiday led all guards during that series, even the Portland Trailblazers, with Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum in points scored. Nobody would have ever guessed that before coming to a series. But again, they were uniquely equipped to stop what the Portland Trailblazers were great at. The Portland Trailblazers were so terrible on defense at the positions where Pelicans had people who could score. They got beat by a team that was worse in the regular season, and it was the upset due to those reasons listed. Greatest upsets in playoff history. Part 4. Number 6 Pelicans versus the Portland Trailblazers, who were the 3rd seed. To sum it up, sometimes the best offense is a great defense. Thank you all for listening. I'm Chris Muhammad, and we are the Basketball Addicts. Peace.